Ladies and gentlemen, this is an extremely important segment. House Democrats rest case in impeachment trial, urging senators to convict. There is a 0% chance they're going to get 17 GOP senators to convict Trump. There's a 0% chance. Okay? They know this. Also, they know they're not going to bar or prevent President Trump or ban him from running again in 2024 with the 14th Amendment. They need 60 votes. Okay, so you need 66 votes to convict, 2/3, and you need just to overcome the filibuster and 60 votes to get the 14th Amendment. They're trying to say that he led a rebellion. Okay? Now, what happened was horrendous, but it wasn't directly Trump's fault, and he did not instruct or plan or lead a rebellion or try to take over the United States government. These are the apoplectic, hysterical, manic, absurd, nonsensical, irrational viewpoints of people who just want to paint Trump as this monster. Now, there shouldn't have been protests that day. I keep saying there should have been a national dialogue, discourse, debate, discussion. And what President Trump did is fall for a trap. In the beginning of his presidency, he was able to become president by taking advantage of two different visions for the country. He was able to take advantage of the fact that most Americans despised or couldn't fathom having a Hillary Clinton presidency. So thank God he saved us from Madam Secretary. But as his presidency continued, Hollywood celebrities, Madonna, everybody, they made the most horrendous, hurtful statements that I can't even talk about on YouTube. I can't even use the words because the algorithm picks up certain words. So Madonna said she wanted to do something specific to the White House. Okay? That would have led to a loss of life. And how many times have you heard statements, and how many stories have there been where the Secret Service had to contact a former actor or actress, or an issue pertaining to heated and extreme and just rhetoric that pushed the envelope in terms of contempt for President Trump. Even the hashtag Wrong Trump was trending when President Trump's brother passed away. I mean, Democrats, many, I shouldn't say all, but many liberal Democrats are just engaged in the most despicable behavior and then pretend and feign this indignation and outrage when President Trump, is belligerent or mean or, writes a tweet or wrote a tweet that was insulting. Now, President Trump shouldn't have insulted NFL athletes. He shouldn't have insulted LeBron James. He shouldn't have utilized Twitter in the manner that Democrats wanted him to do, to utilize Twitter. He fell for a trap, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, cyberspace is where Democrats gain their political influence and momentum. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. We're back on our way to 200,000 subscribers. To my new Patreons, thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Your support is so greatly appreciated. It allows me to be completely independent and do what I do. I'm working on something really special. Two things that are really special, actually. And I'm actually going to, in addition to something really special I'm going to do, I'm going to work on a couple articles and a kind of push and a movement to get certain people in the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Football Hall of Fame. So I'll talk more about that. I'll talk more about that soon. But there's a Raider and a Dodger that both of whom need to be in their respective Hall of Fames. and I'll talk about that more. But ladies and gentlemen, he didn't instruct anyone to do anything. He didn't lead a rebellion. His words are protected under the First Amendment because he didn't plan or instruct or direct anyone to do anything. It was a protest that got completely out of hand with people who took advantage of a situation that led to 5 human beings losing their lives. That is horrendous. That is a tragedy, just unspeakable. But it wasn't Trump's fault directly. They're trying to say that the fact that he engaged in certain arguments led to this. But Democrats have been trying to undermine the integrity of 2016 every single day for 4 years. But the difference, ladies and gentlemen, President Trump and Trump Republicans and people who support President Trump, myself included, I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I used to be the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. I want Americans home from never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. I like that President Trump signed the First Step Act and allocated more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever. Fact. I like the fact that President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and that he signed an executive order combating anti-Semitism, which is running rampant on college campuses. I like the fact that President Trump stands against all the malarkey that Democrats stand for nowadays. But President Trump gave them exactly what they wanted because he was not able to create a dialogue and discussion. People, you have to understand, if you're watching this channel and you say, oh, HA, that's not the, they don't want a discussion. Exactly. That you're proving my point. They didn't want a debate, dialogue, discussion. They didn't want any philosophical disagreement or discussion or debate, or they didn't want any context or nuance. They wanted to paint Trump as somebody who promotes, like, for example, when they tried to say that Trump said both sides, which he didn't. Like, he didn't say there were fine people who were 1930s and 1940s Germans. He didn't even imply that. He didn't infer that. There was no dog whistling. There was no subliminal. It was a simple propaganda, political stunt and ploy. When they don't have his exact words, they then create meaning. He didn't need the help of racists and bigots. He won in 2016. And he did better among non-white voters than any Republican in 60 years in 2020. But that day, when that fateful day took place, he should have simply said, he should have had a public relations, or he should have set the record straight. In every single article that came, said, he said both sides, he said both sides, he should have gone out of his way. He did, but he didn't go out of his way, but he did numerous times say, I wasn't talking about that, I condemn. It was never enough, but if he made it an issue and a point, if he stated categorically, I mean, he did, but it was never enough, but he needed to continue to state categorically. So then Democrats eventually gave up on that, lie. That was a huge lie. That never happened. But they milked that for every ounce. They said, oh, Trump was a subliminal. He said he called the 1930s and 1940s Germans fine people. This is absurd. They acted like a dysfunctional 8th grade class. President Trump could have easily crushed that type of malicious journalism. Okay? Lots of things he could have done. The whole Trump-Russia thing, he could have... I mean, he was busy governing the country. I get that. I understand. He was busy trying to do amazing things like the Abraham Accords and being the first president to step foot in North Korea. I understand that. But what President Trump should have done is, instead of going on Twitter and saying this person and that person and this person and that side and Democrats and whatever. I mean, I loved that he was going after Madam Secretary and the Clintons and the Democrats. I love that. But instead of doing that, he could have done that and also found a way to ask a person like, I don't know, George Stephanopoulos or Anderson Cooper or whatever, what if I had private servers? Would that be okay? Would you mind if I had private servers? Would you mind if I said it was for convenience? I don't know. Like, look. What I'm trying to tell you is he's being silent now, which is a very good thing. He doesn't have Twitter, which is the best thing that ever happened to President Trump, the worst thing to ever happen to Democrats and Twitter. Now they have to govern, and the left is going to break away from the Democratic Party eventually. Eventually, the left will realize the Democratic Party is just using them, and eventually leftists will realize, or like progressives will realize that it really doesn't matter if they're called or labeled Russian operatives, or they need to build up the Green Party or the People's Party or whatever Democratic Socialists or whatever political party to actually utilize leverage against the Democratic and against Democrats who claim that they want Medicare for all, Green New Deal legislation, universal basic income. Those are Green Party policies. They're not even Democratic Party policies. They have nothing to do with the Democratic Party. Nothing. Democrats are not even going to give the $2,000 stimulus check. They're not even going to compromise. They're not even going to be, honest about that. So the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, Democrats run on public relations and social media. They're able to get away with a lot. They have all of Hollywood, corrupt intelligence officials, MSNBC, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Esquire, Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone. How many? Mother Jones, The Nation. How many publications can one political party have? Honestly, how many publications? Republicans, or at least Trump, there are maybe a handful of publications. The New York Post is good. But even the New York Post is like, President Trump, what are you doing the last couple of months? There was no national dialogue and discourse. Now, what President Trump is doing, which is good, is remaining quiet, letting Democrats try to level every accusation at him. The overall claim that he led a rebellion is nonsense. He didn't. There shouldn't have been protests that day because nothing good was going to come from that. I have no clue what President Trump wanted to accomplish that day. I was saying prior to it, well, it's probably not going to... What good could take place? What good could take place? There's nothing good that could take place. You have all of media against you, my God almighty. And then we see what happened. And if you, like I said, if President Trump went on Joe Rogan, or Tim Pool, or The Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, or MSNBC and CNN, and he just, relaxed, I don't know what he needed to do to relax and just realize that they're going to be not the YouTube channels, but like MSNBC and CNN, or instead of having Giuliani with the Just for Men and the press conference, if he just gone on himself and said, "Look, this is what I." Could you imagine how many millions of views if President Trump himself went on Joe Rogan and stated his case? Could you imagine? It would have been 30, 40 million. I'm not joking. It would have easily been 10, 12, 13 million views. And that's a conservative estimate. Could have been 20 million views. The entire planet could have seen. And he could have done this himself. And it would have taken less than a day. Not even. A couple of hours. And then he could have gone on with his business. That would have been infinitely more influential than the protest that day. Look what happened. Now that gave Democrats everything they needed to silence, to no more Parler, to, the algorithm is even more oppressive now. They banned Trump from Twitter, which is actually a very good thing. But they're once Trump Republicans take over the House in 2022, and then there's an instant impeachment, which will happen, the pendulum will swing. When the pendulum swings back, there needs to be some strategic diplomacy. There needs to be, you can't always just take a baseball bat and, bash a hornet's nest and then run away. which is what President Trump did. I understand that it was refreshing. It was refreshing for me as well. But they have too many advantages where they could spin everything. So, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Democrats need 17 senators to convict President Trump. Republican senators, they're not going to get that. They need 10 Republican senators to get to prevent Trump from ever running again. They're not going to get that. Okay, they're not going to get the 5 or 6 senators. Now, I mean the 10 senators. They might get 6. So it could be close. But those senators will be primaried when the time comes. And I mean, because you got 6 who actually voted alongside Democrats to continue with the impeachment proceedings. So, but you're not going to get 60. And President Trump has allowed them, unfortunately, to always be on the 1-yard line. He's given them all these layups. And, like, people, ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand going into this, Trump Republicans need to understand, because there are Mitt Romney Republicans and there's President Trump Republicans. And Trump controls the Republican Party. He's against the Lincoln Project, which the left is against the Lincoln Project, and populists within the conservative, within the Republican Party are against the Lincoln Project. Bush is the worst. George W. Bush was the worst president of all time. Millions of Americans, both left and right, agree. That's something that binds people of all different ideologies. So Bernie Sanders supporters and Trump supporters agree George W. Bush was the worst president of all time. You know who disagrees with that? Democrats and Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and Ben Sasse. But when you know that Democrats have the New York Times and the Washington Post, because the New York Times will never, and the Washington Post will never run a hit piece on Democrats. They will only run hit pieces on Republicans. They will prop up any Republican that dislikes Trump. They will do everything possible to undermine Trump, and that every single day they will have 4 Pinocchios, 3 Pinocchios, 2 Pinocchios with Trump. They will never fact-check. They will hardly ever fact-check Democrats. And then they'll say, well, Democrats just don't lie. But when you know that Democrats have these advantages, maybe if you're President Trump, you should circumvent or overcome those advantages and use any competitive advantages that you have. The internet, by and large, there are more people on the internet that gravitate towards what President Trump stands for, which are good things, okay? The bigotry and the hate and the racism, this is all like fabricated by Democrats. He doesn't stand for those things. You don't sign the First Step Act and remove Americans from never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts and stand for those things, okay? I mean, when he insults people, they can say, his true intentions are out there. See, he gives them that. He needs to be a little bit more diplomatic. But if you know that Democrats have these advantages, then why not circumvent them? Why not overcome those advantages and use your competitive advantages? You know, I mean, there were so many ways the past 2 months, the last 2 months of 2020, 3 months, that President Trump could have stated his case. So many creative ways. And instead, it was an unmitigated political disaster and catastrophe. And still 2/3 of Republicans will follow President Trump anywhere he goes. If he starts a third party, they'd follow him. Give me your thoughts below. President Trump hopefully will run again. I would vote for him again, I'd vote for him again because I oppose the Lincoln Project. The Lincoln Project and the neoconservatives from Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld will still be within the Democratic Party. I want a president like Trump who supports Israel, but I want a president, most importantly, as an American citizen, to bring home Americans from never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. Biden ain't going to be that person. So that's what makes Trump great. And that's why almost everybody that voted for President Trump will vote for him again. He'll get those 74 million people again. if he runs. Hopefully more. Because, the biggest moral dilemma we face is never-ending wars. Just because you're not seeing it on CNN doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay? Americans are still losing their lives overseas. And there's still, and we owe a great deal to the families, and we owe our soldiers better than just to send them forever overseas in counterinsurgency conflicts where people don't want us there. I want these people home, back to their families, their sons, their daughters, their husbands, their wives. I want them home. I want American soldiers home from never-ending conflict. That's why I would vote for President Trump again. But I'm hoping President Trump learns from mistakes the past 5-6 months, past couple of years, and rebound stronger than ever. Give me your thoughts below. He's not getting convicted. He will get acquitted. They are not going to prevent him from running again. And 2022 will be very, very interesting. Give me your thoughts below, because I think that Republicans will not only take over the House, but you'll finally have a Republican Party that stands up for the ideals, the good and positive values that President Trump stands for. Give me your